Welcome to the JoeQCar Show. This week on the show, we have Bradley Brownell. We talk about electrification and racing, specifically with Formula One, Formula E, and a little bit of the 24-hour stuff, too. Check out Bradley Brownell's podcast on the Hooniverse Network. It's called Camden Tubbed, and he also does a racing show called the DFL Show. Check that one out, too. If you have questions, comments, or concerns for the show, check out the Facebook page, JoeQCar Show. Bradley, welcome to the JoeQCar Show. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you, and how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing also quite well. You've been around the world. I'm glad you had a few minutes just to talk to me here about the electrification of racing. But welcome back to your home and your recording studio. I haven't heard you at Camden Tub at all in like months.
Yeah, it's been over a month since I've recorded a new episode of Camden Tub, so we're actually recording tonight, and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, we actually had a little bit of a feud because I told Cam that he needed to watch Baby Driver.
Oh yeah,
and I was like, it's a fantastic movie, you'll love it, it's great, and he just straight up refused to see it.
Why?
Does he
not like Subarus?
I don't know. So I said, I'm not coming back on the show until you watch Baby Driver. And he watched the movie last night, so we're recording today.
Well, that excellent feud, but if only all feuds ended that perfectly.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the JoeQCar Show. On this episode, I wanted to discuss the electrification. We're kind of on an EV kick on the JoeQCar Show here.
I've actually been on a bit of an EV kick myself, so I'm excited. Let's hunker down and get into it.
I'm an avid Formula One fan. I know you
okay.
Maybe not so much for you, right?
I used to be really, really into it. And then a couple of years ago, I could not bring myself to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch the races anymore. I just
understand.
said, when it was Mercedes winning everything 2 years in a row, I was like, that's it. I'm done for a while.
I understand.
And people have told me that like this season is really good and I should be watching. And I agree. I probably should. I just haven't. So,
well, have you paid attention to anything happening in the Formula E world?
I have.
Their race weekend is compressed into one day. And you can actually watch a highlight that's like a 45-minute highlight of everything that happened, or you can watch the 8-hour-long YouTube clip and just hope and scrub for decent footage. But yeah. Their race weekends are really inconsistent. It's not like Formula One where there's a week on, a week off, week on, week off, or sometimes there's double headers or whatever.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track of, and as somebody who tries to keep track of it,
yes,
it's tough
exactly.
to do. But what I want to
I have a motorsport podcast, and I promised myself that I was going to watch every round. I think I've watched 3 rounds so far.
It's hard because you don't know.
So far the season's over.
Yeah, right. But you don't know when they end up airing or not airing. But so what I wanted to get at was the electrification of racing. What do you think, as someone who really follows a lot of different racing, just all kinds of different racing, what do you think is going to happen with our beloved gasoline vehicles?
The analogy that always comes to mind is horse racing. You know, horses, there was a time where horses were the main mode of transportation, and racing horses was a way of using that to leverage your passions. These days, horses are no longer your main mode of transportation and haven't been for 100 years, basically.
Yeah.
So, but they are still raced today.
There are many equestrians out there that love their horses.
So I would say that the gasoline engine in, say, 100 years will be essentially a non-starter as transportation, but there will still be, vintage racing and traditional forms of racing that use internal combustion engines for propulsion. So I don't think it's ever going to go away completely, but I do think that EV is possibly the future.
Well, I do think something like Formula One that has been so iconic and has, I mean, like all racing, has pushed manufacturers to develop road technologies.
Sure.
This effect of technology that comes down into the normal cars, first it goes into supercars and then eventually comes down to us normal people. I mean, we're not normal people, but the other people. But
right.
These kind of technologies, I feel like racing owes it to the community to be pushing the boundaries of technology and engineering. And I feel like we've gotten so much out of the internal combustion engine. Going to the next step is the electrification, coupling it with a traditional motor like Formula One's doing, or you can go full on electric like what Formula E is doing, and also some other interesting things. Even in the is it the weather tech? There's actually some e-mobility and electrification going on in the 24-hour series, right?
There has been. So WeatherTech is IMSA. That's the one that's based in the U.S. There is currently no EV or hybrid running in that series. 24-hour series is a different series that actually runs all over the world, and they only run really long endurance races.
The one I'm looking at, and I just must have been conflating the IMSA races with another like long form racing. The one I was looking at it's called Green for You, and it's actually by Panos, or however you want to say it.
Yeah. Panos. Yeah. Dr. Don, he's based out of Atlanta. Yep.
Right. So, exactly this guy. You were just in Atlanta. You've basically met this guy. So, yeah. So
I have met that guy. I've met Dr. Don. He's all right.
Okay. Well, he has plans for an electric vehicle that's going to be doing some 24-hour racing.
Yes. The Green for You, the GTEV, is going to be racing at Le Mans. Le Mans actually has this really interesting thing called Garage 56. So they only allow 55 entries. That's actually been increased, so Garage 56 doesn't really... 56 isn't the number that it used to signify, but Garage 56 is dedicated to new technologies. So they allow cars that don't fit the rules to race in the race as long as they're developing new technologies. So, for example, in the past, that has been... so it was Delta Wing, and then the following year, Nissan brought something... I can't remember what it was called. The Zeod. ZEOD. And it was the first car to complete a lap of Le Mans on full EV power. It was not fast. It did not finish the race, but it did complete a full lap of the race on EV power. Last year, or maybe it was the year before. I think it was the year before. They actually had somebody who was, I want to say he was paraplegic, and they actually built a car specifically to use hand controls and things like that, which was cool technology, and they allowed that to run. That was a traditional LMP2 style race car. And then GTEV is Panos's Green for You Industries or whatever. They're going to have swappable, rechargeable batteries that the car will come in, it will pit, and instead of taking on fuel, they'll pull out a battery pack and slide in a new battery pack.
They do this in a really cool way, just kind of painting a picture for the listeners here. So the driver's actually offset to one side, and when they pull into the pits, there's a compartment that slides open and reveals a massive battery pack that they will be taking out and putting in. This battery is supposed to get them around 50 minutes of race time between stops. So every 50, that's 50 minutes, they're going to be switching out the batteries on this GTEV, and that's going to be their pit stops, right? I don't think they're going to change drivers during that time, because that would be a lot of driver changes.
Well, I mean, yeah, for a 24-hour race, you're going to have driver changes.
Yeah, but every 50 minutes?
Usually not. So at Le Mans, in general, your cars run between 50 minutes and an hour and 10.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's about right then.
Yes. So there are frequently times, like even the top level prototypes that currently run are running about 50-minute stints, and they'll come in and they'll take fuel. Occasionally they'll take tires. Usually they'll run 3 full stint. That's what's called a stint, is your 50-minute fuel stint. Mm-hmm. They'll occasionally take tires, usually every 2 to 3 fuel stops, and usually when they change tires is also when they change drivers. So you're in the car for 3 hours, give or take, and then they'll put new tires and swap out a new driver. And there's four drivers per car.
So what do you see this being its own class? Maybe its own electric class.
Possibly. So the problem is that Panoz doesn't really have the best track record. They talk a big game and they promote this new technology, and then they have no way for it to go forward. They just kind of I don't want to say they half-ass their way into it, but they kind of do.
Okay.
So it's like. Okay, so like when Tesla first started building EVs, everybody's comment was, well, there's no infrastructure for it. There's nowhere to charge it. There's nowhere to plug it in aside from your own house. So you have this, range anxiety. The problem with what Panoz does is very similar in that they're building this thing that has no outlet. There's no infrastructure for an EV race car. This car will not be competitive on speed because it just doesn't have the downforce. It doesn't have the power. It's only got 600 horsepower, which, is quite a bit. Yeah, and it does have all-wheel drive. But it'll have top speed, but it won't have the downforce through the corners, so they'll be slowing down earlier.
The weight distribution has to be pretty weird with that battery pack. That's another challenge.
Well, it looks like it's relatively centrally located, and it's going to be relatively low in the chassis. So I think your polar moment's probably going to be okay, assuming that it's engineered well. This is a carbon fiber monocoque, so basically you're just sitting on a stack of batteries with wheels on it.
Yes.
So
it's like a real fancy Power Wheel.
Kind of, yeah, or a really fast one.
Yeah.
Assuming that this has the technology to go 200 miles an hour for 24 hours at a time, then I could see this being a standalone, GT or prototype electric series, and they could sell 12 to 15 of these to independent race companies that teams that want to run in this series. But they're going to have to invent this series. They're going to have to promote the series. They're going to have to bring on sponsors, and that's their less than strong point.
So I think that's a good segue into talking about Formula E as opposed to Formula One here.
Sure.
So Formula E has a lot of that right now. They have actually, I feel like Formula E has a lot of momentum and are doing a lot of things right as far as courting race fans into their stadiums or into the cities where the races are going on.
Yes, correct. More than anything, they aren't courting race fans. They're courting people. Mm-hmm. So they're bringing motorsport to downtown central cities that don't currently have motorsport. They ran in, Paris. And they ran
right in the downtown areas too. Downtown, all of their circuits are built in city centers. So I get where you're going, where they are trying to attract normal people.
Yes, correct. And that's part of why I think they're successful, is because they're reaching a crowd that doesn't give a shit about racing at all. They're people that are like, that have never been to a Formula One race or have never been to the 24 Hours of Le Mans, probably have never even heard of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, that are sitting down in New York and watching a Formula E race because it's there, because it's fun, because it's loud,
and there's something going
on. It's a piece of entertainment. It's kind of like when you're walking around in the city and you see stand-up comedy.
I was just going there in my head too. It's like going to see a comic. Like, hey, we should go do this.
Yeah, like you don't have to like that comic. You don't have to know anything about them. You just go, hey, let's go see comedy. It's here. There's somebody that's shouting at you, hey, live comedy, and you go, it sounds like a good idea.
It's like, let's
that's
go
what
see
Formula E
We'll watch Buemi and Degrassi do their set. It'll be real fun.
Exactly. So yes, I think that there is they're reaching a new niche that's never been reached before, and I think that's why they've been so successful in attracting sponsors, in attracting manufacturers to the series. Formula One runs at tracks that, I mean, they're trying to get a track at Paul Ricard that literally does not have grandstands.
What? Yeah. So where is that located at? I don't know where that is in the world.
Paul Ricard's in France.
Okay, that I could have taken a guess, but I wagered I should have guessed that.
But it's a test track. It's where companies go. They'll rent the track for the whole day, and they'll test their cars in secret because nobody's there. That's the whole point of the circuit. And then, Formula One is trying to make that a place where they want to run a race where, they don't even want spectators. They just want it to all be on TV. And Formula E is doing the complete opposite. They're like, no, we want to be right in, we want... It's the millennial culture of saying, I want to be a disruptor. I want to be involved in someone's life, and I want to inject myself in someone's life so that they know I exist. Whereas if you're at a racetrack that's 50 miles from the nearest city, you're off, in a corner shouting at yourself.
I would agree with you up until this year, where I feel that the guys over at Liberty and gals, the people over at Liberty Media, are doing a much better job than Bernie Ecclestone.
That is fair.
I mean, think of what, we actually can get legit Formula One videos on YouTube now. It's amazing, and they're the
baby
media,
steps.
The media
baby steps.
What they're doing now should have been done 4 years ago, but they're getting there. But what I think is what's really interesting about Formula E is the way that they're attracting manufacturers in, where Formula One actually took road technology and adapted it to racing, which is historically never really happening. Normally, it's racing bringing the technology to the road. Formula One actually was like, you know what? This hybrid turbo, that's the future of ultra cars and performance vehicles. We need to adapt that strategy. And where Formula E is actually saying, no, we're going full electric, which is clearly going to be the future here. So Formula E is actually ahead of Formula One when it comes to engine development and applying the lessons learned from racing and applying them to road vehicles. And I think that's why you see companies like Jaguar and Audi and all the other manufacturers, Mahindra, who does a lot of supplying of other auto manufacturers.
Yeah, so now you've got Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, BMW.
Renault.
So you've got all four German companies. You've got Renault, you've got DS, which is Citroen. You've got Jag,
that's Tata.
Mahindra, Faraday Future to an extent.
Dragon? Well, I don't know. Dragon is another company out there.
Dragon is actually a race team.
Okay.
So Dragon is actually owned by Jay Penske, which is Roger Penske's son. So it's basically like Roger didn't want the Penske name associated with it because he's like, I'm not sure you're going to be successful yet. But here's some money. Go start a race team.
By the way, here's these guys named Faraday Future. Make sure you team up with them too.
Right. Well, Dragon's actually been running a couple of Indy cars for a while. They've run at the Indy 500 like on one-off kind of.
I'm excited to see these technologies that are in lessons that are being learned by these companies. I'm excited to see these things be applied to the road. And I just was reading in some industry magazine. It was Electric and Hybrid magazine. So I was looking at the July 2017 issue of this.
I didn't even know that existed. How do I get a subscription?
I think actually subscriptions are free, so you should go check it out. It's called Electric and Hybrid Vehicle Technology International, and they did a great little article. It's not a huge expose, but they did a great article on transforming a Formula One race car into a street legal hybrid supercar. And they talked with the lead engineer of Mercedes' next hypercar. and it's called the Project One. This Project One is basically a detuned Formula One car, kind of pulling an F50 like what Ferrari did in like 9.
Well, I mean that's marketing, but okay.
Oh, okay. Jeez, you really come on, man. I'm just trying to make a transition here. But okay, so they are, and I will believe the marketing at this point because we really don't have anything else to believe, right? So they're taking the W08, that's the Formula One car that won last year, or no, that's this year's car, and they're going to be basically releasing a road version of that. And it's weird to see the Formula One technology be the one that they're picking. It makes sense because they're so winning over there on that side. But sure. I feel like Formula E definitely has that same kind of appeal and actually makes more sense for the long term to see manufacturers making sports cars and road cars based off of Formula E.
Okay, so two things. I don't think Formula One is that relevant. And two, Formula E, I've said this in the past, Formula E will outstrip Formula One by the end of the decade.
And when you said that, I was like, I don't know. End of the decade. Okay, that's 2020.
I'm giving them, yes, 2020. That is 3 Formula E seasons from now.
Hopefully, right? So, but you really think that Formula One will be surpassed by Formula E because Formula E has the mix right. It has the marketing, it has the momentum,
correct.
So why is that? Defend yourself.
Here's something that I want to clarify or bring about is look at what Formula One was in 2007, 2008. You had Honda, Toyota, BMW. You had Mercedes, and it was everybody was in it. Like it was a big thing. Renault before they quit and then came back and then quit and then came back again. And it was big. It was huge. It was global, and it still is. But I think it's losing some momentum. Yeah. And they've certainly, they were down to 2 manufacturers at one point.
I think it was always at least 3.
It was just Ferrari and.
Well, I mean, you have teams like Williams. You have teams that are.
No, sure, but I mean for engine. manufacturers.
Engine manufacturers. Yeah, it was.
There was a point where it was just. I think Ferrari and Mercedes.
But I think I always thought Renault was in the mix too.
No, because there was the year that it was
that had
Lotus with a Ferrari engine, and they had
that's when Kimi was racing for Lotus. Okay, yeah. So let's not get lost in the weeds here. So they have a very limited engine manufacturers.
So, but the point that I want to get to is they had all of these manufacturers and they threw it away because the series is so expensive to run. You had teams like Toyota that were spending $500 million to build a mid-pack car. And then Toyota goes, f this, we're out of here.
It was Panasonic and
Toyota. Can I swear on your show? I'm sorry. They said, forget it, and they ran away because it was so expensive and they weren't getting anything out of it. You had Honda leaving. You had, Renault left and then came back.
I mean, it's Formula E is being disruptive to racing. They're really gunning for people that are casual race fans, being able to watch the replays on YouTube, being able to interact with the race. Like they give you the ability to give a driver a boost in power to make a pass, to make the races more interesting. This is things that are not being done in other race series. This is something that we've only thought about in video games and Mario Kart or whatever.
That's one thing that works for the series, but it also kind of works against the series because, you have the fan interaction. You had, when they first started, they had an EJ, which is
I know.
So dumb.
That was so lame.
And they have this fan boost thing, and they have their, what do they call it? V Sports or, digital racing, online racing. I'm old. I'm sorry. I just turned 30. I don't understand technology anymore. But so there are certain aspects of the series that advance it in the eyes of normal people, but those same aspects of the series are considered,
faux pas.
Kind of, yeah, like anti-racing, like kitschy and dumb to the traditional race fan.
This series is having a harder. It has its own headwinds being taken seriously because of how it's approaching its marketing.
Yes, correct. But to that point, it is marketing. That's why they're having so much success, is because they are reaching people that nobody's reached before. They're getting involved, and they're getting into inner cities, and they're getting to the downtowns where people are, where young people are especially, and they're promoting themselves to a younger audience. And that's what the manufacturers want. A BMW wants to get in and say, hey, look, we're exciting and we're on the leading edge of technology and we're doing all of this. Oh, and by the way, it only costs like $10 million to run this series instead of $400 to run in Formula One. Great. Our bean counters love that so much. So I'm really interested in technology. I'm really interested in EV especially. We're actually aiming to get my wife an EV to drive every day. I still drive old, terrible cars, so...
that's the curse that we have. We like old, terrible cars, and the rest of the world will pass us by, and then in 100 years, we're going to be the horse people.
Exactly. Well, I mean, in 100 years, I'll probably be dead, but...
You might be bionic.
Well, I suppose.
Maybe.
I'll be racing an internal combustion engine with a bionic everything. Just my brain in a robot. What are the ethics of that? I don't even know.
He is the car.
Yes. Yes. When I die, insert my consciousness into a 1973 MG midget.
I don't know if that's gonna.
But I will say that I think that EV is the future. I think that it has a place in racing, and we didn't even really cover sound. That I think is the big thing, the big holdup for a lot of people, a lot of traditional race fans. There are people that left Formula One, that left watching Formula One when they went to the V6 turbos because they were saying that, oh, it's not loud enough and oh, it's not exciting enough. I mean, that's BS. But at the same time, there are people that are there for the excitement, for the rawness, for the speed and all that. And it's harder to convey speed when the sound is your gearbox.
And so this is what I want to see from EV. I want to see EVs on racetracks like Laguna Seca, Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca.
So
I don't want to see them in a city. I want to see them do Monza. I want to see them do the races that Formula One is doing.
So I think part of the reason they're doing that is a little bit of marketing, because one, they don't want to have a direct comparison with another motorsport series because they're frankly so much slower.
Fast. Yeah.
They're not as fast as even an IndyCar or a GP2. It's frankly, it is a little bit slow.
It is a little bit slow. They're using street tires.
Yes, essentially. So I do know somebody at Michelin, and I want to talk to them more about this in the future, but we've talked a little bit about it in the past. And Formula E, Michelin has been on board with Formula E since 2012. They're like,
yes,
they were one of the first companies that was like, yes, we are in on this, we are down. But they're using each of these weekends as almost like a...
it's development. It's R&D.
Yeah, it's a mobile laboratory. It's a worldwide laboratory that they're using to R&D a sports car tire, or a tire that still has good lateral load. You can still get good G's out of it, but still is a low rolling resistance tire. So they're allowing Michelin to develop this tire that will eventually be used on the road. This technology will make the road, when you have EVs and hybrids that need a low rolling resistance tire for that MPG, but still want to have a sporty aspect.
Yeah, and I think for me, Formula E is very appealing because of that the technology that we will see in the cars in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Because that is why I think Formula E is such an interesting series, and I think that it has a long life ahead of it is because that is how we're going to be getting around. And I think also once we start being just driven around in automated living rooms, I think maybe this will even find another audience, because it's like, look at, there's human driving cars. This is weird, this is a different experience. These guys get behind a wheel and steer it.
So yeah, I think that Formula E is headed in the right direction. In not this next season, but the season after, they'll have larger batteries that'll be able to run the entire race.
Which I'm very excited about, because that's the other weird part about the racing in Formula E.
Swapping
where it's like,
cars.
All right, we're racing. And then they're like, all right, just stop for a minute. Now get out. Here you go. Run in here. Do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's another part that people have always kind of had as a hang-up. It doesn't ever really bother me, because it's basically the same thing as... I mean, they do that in MotoGP. If you have a tire go flat, you come into the pits and you hop on another bike and you leave. So I mean,
they used to do that in Le Mans. They used to run to their car, start it up, and speed away from the grid.
Right.
That when men were men and cars didn't have seatbelts.
Back how it used to be.
But yeah, back when racing was real racing, not any of this fake stuff with windscreens and protectors.
Right. So I think they're headed in the right direction, and because of that, they're getting all of this attention from these big manufacturers that want to be involved in this, and they want to be on the ground floor. So yeah, I think that it has a huge future, and I think there's a potential for this series to outstrip Formula One in 3 years.
3 years. All right, that's a bold ass prediction.
Yep.
We'll have to have you back. Bradley, where can the people find you?
Oh my God, where can't they find me?
You're all over the place. Where do you want them to find you?
I am currently the Porsche contributor to thedrive.com. You can find all my stuff there. It's under the drive. It's thedrive.com/flat-6-society. Is all my Porsche stuff. And then I'm also working on some stuff for European Car Magazine, so I'll have the cover of the next month's issue.
Oh, great. That's going to be cool. I'll look for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I was on the cover of Auto Week at the end of July, so I'm sure there's a way to get a back issue. I'm not sure how, but I was in the Porsche 912E. I did a cross-country road trip and wrote about it. So
that was a really... just that picture, seeing
that
car,
God.
That was great, man.
Every photo in that set turned out amazingly. Gil Folk was the guy that did the photo set, and he is an amazing photographer. He's like 24 or something like that, and already an incredible eye.
That's superb.
Yes.
I think that so that was Auto Week, right?
Auto Week, yep. And then I'm currently working on a couple things for Jalopnik, some event coverage, and I also write for Hooniverse.com. And then I have 2 podcasts, both on Shout Engine. One is the DFL show. That is my motorsport show. So if you liked what we talked about here today, you can hear a whole lot more about that in very explicit detail. And,
there may be swearing.
There may be some swears.
There is definitely swearing.
Yes. And then you can also hear me on the Camden Tubbed podcast. That is a show that's been running for 4 years now, so go check that out. My buddy Cam Vanderhorst is the other half of that show. So I'm around. You can also catch me on Instagram. It's at Turbo with an H. So TURBOH Brad, and on Twitter at BC Brownell. That's my last name, BROWNELL.
You are everywhere. You are a busy man. I just come after this month. You've been all over the world. Definitely check out Bradley's stuff here, because, dude, I'm just talking to the listeners. It is just, I've been following him on Instagram and Facebook. It is just amazing what this guy's doing. Go check his stuff out. give him a follow, give him a like. Just check out the articles. He does some great work.
When people ask me to be somewhere, I usually don't say no. So I do a lot of traveling and I do a lot of writing about it. So I am, I quit my day job to be a full-time writer in February of this year. So, any support that I could get would be great.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and coming on to this show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
And as you can tell, Bradley Brownell is an excellent human being, and we loved having him on the show. Want to make sure that you go check out his Instagram and follow him on social media. Read his articles. Great writer. And I'm really happy he came on. I wanted to give a shout-out to Nail 1200 for making the theme music here that we're using right now. And I want to give a shout-out to Shout Engine. Shout Engine, start your own podcast for free in under 5 minutes at shoutengine.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been the JoeQCar Show. Give me a follow at JoeQCar.